So, as Tom said, my name is Robin Bousel. What an honor and a privilege it is to stand here today to share a bit of my story with all of you. After reflecting on a lot of what I'm about to share with you, frankly, it's an honor, a privilege, and pretty much a miracle that I'm standing at all. But thank you for allowing me to specifically be here today. I promise to try and keep the crying to a minimum, but I have my tissues, so I'm prepared. First, a quick nod to Father's Day. My father would have thought that was funny. I'm sure he's chuckling wherever he is, and my mother is standing behind him, shaking her head, thinking how ridiculous her daughter is, but sorry, Mom, you raised a comedian. As I mentioned a few weeks back, this was my first Mother's Day without my mom. My father passed away back in 2002, so for those of you who enjoy math, feel free to calculate how many years that was while the rest of us move on. Pause for laughter. Excellent. Okay. What I would like to share with you today is the story of a person. She's about this tall, she's about this wide, she has amazing hair, a pretty decent singing voice, and a wildly inappropriate sense of humor. Generally speaking, she has a pleasant demeanor. She tries to help out as much as she can, whenever she can. She loves to laugh, make others laugh, loves to lift people up, show them the good inside themselves when they themselves can't often see it. She fights for what's right, whether it's popular opinion or not. She's a boss, literally and figuratively. She loves an audience. As Ron pointed out a few weeks ago at his goodbye party, she has a very hard time putting down a microphone when there's a captive audience, so you're welcome. Spoiler alert, it's me. Hold for applause. No? Okay. But the side of myself, that's the side of myself that I've generally always tried to show to the public. But recently, I've started a new movement in my own life, and that's mainly what I want to talk to you about today. Now, I know our order of practice says we're talking about our communal family, and I assure you we will get there. But to get to that point, we have to digress for a little bit first, to talk about post-traumatic growth. So as a relatively new and emerging field of positive psychology, they're still kind of working out the definitions, but essentially, post-traumatic growth, or benefit finding, is positive psychological change experienced as a result of adversity and other challenges in order to rise to a higher level of functioning. Now, it's a fairly simple concept, although its execution isn't always so simple. Growth from tragedy, essentially. Good from bad, light out of darkness, and also light because of darkness. Now, post-traumatic growth is essentially born from this new movement of positive psychology, which, in short, is more about fulfillment of values and less about mental illness and drugging away disease. It's more about talk therapy and working through our problems. And these are, again, very simplified terms to discuss a very complicated thing. But this isn't a college course, so let's just keep it simple. Now, traditional psychology's equivalent of thriving is called resilience, which is reaching the previous level of functioning before a tragedy or stressor or a challenge has occurred. And the difference between resilience and thriving is essentially the recovery point, where trauma occurs, you can either succumb to it, you can bounce back, which is resilience, or you can thrive, or grow, or change. Now, struggling is a universal language. I'm pretty sure that everyone experiences trauma in one way or another. Some of them you've shared with us over time, some you maybe have never shared with anyone, some haven't occurred yet. With these, traumas often cause chain reactions of difficult circumstances, and these circumstances represent significant challenges to the adaptive resources of the individual and pose significant challenges to our way of understanding the world and our own place in the world. Post-traumatic growth involves life-changing psychological shifts in thinking and relating to the world that contribute to a personal process of change that is deeply meaningful. Now, this is important. Growth does not occur as a direct result of trauma. It's not guaranteed. Rather, it's the individual's struggle with the new reality and the aftermath of trauma that is crucial in determining the extent to which post-traumatic growth can occur. So now some key predictors in whether or not you can grow from a tragedy are spirituality, and that, of course, can mean anything to a UUA, and by all means, that's fine. It's all about your own personal connection. Acceptance coping. We've all heard that we have to accept the things that we cannot change, whether we like it or not. True. Social support has also been well documented as a buffer for mental illness and stress response. Support community, our communal family, friends and family, our faith communities, they all count. And studies have shown that neurobiological evidence, we're gonna get a little college-y, neurobiological evidence to support the idea that this kind of support, the acceptance, the spirituality, the social support from your communal network, it can modulate the stress response pathways in the brain. All right, see if I can say this. These are called hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical pathways. Whew, right? So basically the pathways in your brain, when you feel certain things, you have responses, those synapses fire, they form pathways. And as we remember from Jurassic Park, with chaos theory, sometimes they go in different directions. But the more you repeat a path over and over, the more it builds its way. And we have to change those pathways. And when it's stress-related, trauma-related, they're deep pathways. Right now, there's tons of studies that are actually happening studying the opportunity for emotional disclosure, which is basically storytelling, sharing your stories, and how that can lead directly to post-traumatic growth, although it doesn't necessarily alleviate your suffering. In fact, there is a study happening at the U of A right now on post-traumatic growth and on post-traumatic stress disorder. They keep calling me, so I should probably call them back. Anyway. As some of you remember, when I first started coming to MVUU, I was just back from doing a cabaret in Chicago, and I was getting ready to go back and do another one called the FML Cabaret. Now, we're all adults here. However, we're in a very lovely church, so I'm not going to say what the F word stands for, but I think we all know what the F word traditionally means. But in this instance, the F has a double meaning. Now, the cabaret was designed as a forum for sharing our narratives, like we just talked about. Being able to have that support community, sharing your narrative, hearing someone else's narrative about their struggle can be very helpful in overcoming personal trauma. So I wanted to form this cabaret to build a community amongst other artists who are some of the top sufferers of the world. We like to wear those on our sleeves. And although you don't have to be an artist to suffer, we know that. I formed this cabaret to give people a forum, whether they wanted to sing about it or do stand-up comedy about it. I've had burlesque performers. I've had all kinds of interesting things come up on my stages. But again, it was all about building that community and sharing those stories, sharing the pathway that we personally have walked from tragedy to triumph, from dark into light. It was a very supportive and amazingly emotional environment, and it's something that I want to continue to do for the rest of my life. These explorations, as hard as they can be, they teach us that tragedy and trauma, even though they occur in our lives, they don't have to be for nothing. And they don't have to be all of the loss. And it doesn't mean taking away the pain of what we suffered. It doesn't mean saying, oh, yeah, no, who cares that all that happened to me? Like, I'm fine now because I got a new car. Woo! It's giving the power and the credence and the emotion to that pain that we've suffered, but not letting it be in vain, finding something good from it. And my favorite author is Richard Bach. I don't know if you know who he is, but he wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Illusions, Bridge Across Forever, and a ton of other really fantastic books. I highly recommend him. But one of my favorite things that he wrote about is that no problem comes into your life without a gift for you in its hands. And we seek out life's problems because we need their gifts. Now, the first time I heard that, I was like, well, I didn't go out looking for any trouble. well, maybe on a subconscious level, or if you believe that there is something bigger and more and a bigger meaning to all of this and all of us being here, I personally feel that I gave myself these challenges in this life for a reason. And the only reason that I've been able to come to terms with so far is to be able to stand and tell other people the things that I've been through and say, hey, I survived. Maybe you can too. Let's talk about it. So while I have a microphone and I'm talking about pain and suffering, and this isn't exactly a cabaret, so I'm not going to sing about it, but I'd like to share a speed-through round of some of the trauma that I have personally experienced to give you a small ounce of credibility and belief in what I'm saying. At 3 days old, my first trauma occurred. I was given away. Now, some people look at adoption as a beautiful thing, as do I. I think adoption is fantastic, but on a biological level, the very first bond that I was ever supposed to have was broken after 3 days, which left me with years' worth of abandonment issues that my therapist truly appreciates. At age 10, a very small child, I moved all the way across the country. Had to start a whole new school, meet new friends, a whole new place. At 10 years old, that is terrifying. I was actually quite moved by the Ferris children, who were super excited about their move across the country and to another country. I was like, I'm having anxiety for you. And they're like, we got this, it's cool. Not me at 10, I was a mess. My life was over at 10. Then at age 16, my brother died. My brother died of a heroin overdose in our house. My mother found him. She was going to wake him up for work on a Monday morning. We had thought he was out of town for the weekend on a fishing trip, that's what we were told. She found his door locked, and she opened it with a screwdriver and found him slumped over on the television. When the coroners got there, they told us he'd been dead at least 24, possibly 48 hours, which means he had been dead in our home the entire weekend, and none of us knew. The last words that I said to my brother, mind you, because he took a t-shirt out of my closet, were, I hate you, and I wish you were dead. I drew a picture for him. I made a map for him to drive off a cliff. That was 7 years of therapy by itself, right there. 2 weeks after my brother died, they told me my father had 6 months to live. And those 6 months, thank God, turned into 5 years. However, they were 5 years of any day now. Every time my phone rang, anytime somebody was like, Robin, I have to tell you something, instant fear. Right before my father died, my uncle passed away. My uncle was the pillar of health. My father's side of the family, very Jewish, I say that very lovingly. On my uncle's tombstone, it said, Paul Yablon, beloved husband, father, brother, uncle, never sick a day in his life, and now this. Truth. Yeah. He actually died at 9:11 in the morning on the anniversary of 9/11, which he would have actually thought was quite funny. None of us thought him dropping dead was very funny. However, in hindsight, it's worth a good chuckle. I'm sure he's laughing too. At 21, I lost both uncle and father. So at 22, it all kind of hit me. I had lost my brother, I'd lost my father, I was failing out of college, I didn't even want to go to the school I was going to, they didn't have a program that I wanted to be in, but I was there to be close because it was any day now, and I wanted to be able to be there with my family. I actually had a full scholarship to go to AMDA in New York, which is the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, and that was always my dream, to go to Broadway, be a big star. But it didn't quite work out that way, yet. So I stayed close to home. I went through all that trauma, and at 22, I met the man I thought I was gonna marry, which ended in glorious fire and chaos. And at 22 was the first time that I almost took my own life. And I made it, clearly. The only reason I survived was because I had a community of support. And granted, I pushed a lot of people away, but I did have a couple people that were still around, including my mother and my birth mother, adopted, so I have multiple parents, and a few very key friends who just kept talking me through it and processing me through it and getting me to stay on the phone instead of doing stupid things or contacting me every day to make sure that I was still around. And it was tough, but I made it through. Then I spent some years in Chicago and rebuilding and kicking around and finding jobs and learning how to survive. And just when I started to kind of get it together and was like, you know what, I got this. Yeah, I've been through a lot. And yeah, maybe I dropped out of college and I don't have a degree. But I can do this. I got a decent job in sales. I was making more money than any of my friends, than anyone in my family. And I was helping my mom and helping my brother do theater and giving money to friends. And I was at the top of my game. I even opened my own nonprofit arts organization and produced my first show, all by myself. And then at 31, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which kind of took precedent over everything else. And that began a whole new battle of life, which I am still fighting every day. At 33, after a couple surgeries, I was re-diagnosed, more tumors, same place. At 35, my mother started being abused by her boyfriend. She was here, I was in Chicago. At the time, my mother was 75. She was supposed to be in the beginning of the end of her life. You know, the next 20, hopefully, years, maybe a little bit more, would be easier, calmer, right? No, that's not how that works. So I dropped pretty much everything to begin the fight to save her. I came out here, I stopped a lot of violence from happening, I physically moved her to another state, and then she decided to come back, which was great, because she came back to Tucson, but also not so great, because he was here. And she started talking to him again and having interactions with him that I didn't know about until later, unfortunately, till after I lost her, which, from reading a lot of her journals, sorry I'm sharing your personal life, Mom, was more of a cause of her giving up on her own will to survive than I realized initially. And that's another thing that I'm working on processing through. And at 37, last year, as most of you know, I lost her. I lost my apartment. I was living with my best friend. We'd been there for 5 years. We had a gorgeous condo. We were happy. Everything was comfortable, and it was a great environment. And then the people that we were renting from actually went into foreclosure and didn't tell us. And the bank took the condo and said, get out. So we did. And I moved into an apartment under duress because I was out here trying to help my mother. And then when I got back to this apartment that I'd moved into under duress, the maintenance people had broken into my apartment. They had trashed a bunch of my things. They were leaving me threatening messages. My apartment was infested with mice. You know, all those great things that you look for when you're looking for a nice apartment. And I decided I had to get out of there. And as I was ready to look at a couple new places and make another leap, I was let go from my job. In addition, insult to injury, the show that I'd been working on for 2 years, Tony and Tina's Wedding, which was the most fun I'd ever had in my entire life, came to a halt because management and production couldn't get along. So basically, my entire world came crumbling to the ground last year. It was a lot. It remains a lot. And as a lot of you may recall, I recently shared that I had a very scary incident where I almost decided to give up again recently. It's hard to say those things in public. And granted, this is a small public because it's our little community, but it is also on the internet, so hello world. It's important though. It's incredibly important to stand up and say, I almost gave up my life because I hurt so badly from everything that I've been through. I hurt so much every day, and I have to fight every single day to get out of bed, to even go to work, to brush my teeth sometimes, to take care of myself. It hurts. But it has to happen. It matters. My life matters. Your life matters. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the different types of communities that I have had support from over the years, as I mentioned. This community, this MVUU community, is a community I never expected, ever. Never really been a very religious person. I used to fight and scream and kick, and I never wanted to go to church as a kid. I was like, what is all of this mess? God, who? Jesus this? I don't care. But as I got older, and I started to learn a little bit about the universe, or at least my beliefs about the universe, and about energy, and about people, and about life, and struggling, and all of these horrible things I just listed, I've not only bounced back, in fact, I've been titled the Queen of Resilience in the past, but I am changing my title from Queen of Resilience to becoming a post-traumatic growth ambassador. And I feel that there is nothing more noble that I could do with my life than to spend my time putting down my weapons of self-destruction and picking up a lantern of self-illumination. And I thank this community for allowing me to share so much of myself with you, whether it's through a cabaret concert in Jane's and Conrad's living room, or whether it's sharing a story during Joys and Sorrows, or having the opportunity to actually stand here for 21 minutes and 12 seconds to tell you all about what I've been through. You know, I spent so much of my life thinking that I needed security, whether it was financial security or parental security, but security is an illusion. You know, there is no such thing. We could have everything perfect and all of our ducks in a row, and the world can change in the drop of a hat. So, what do we actually really have in life? And I think the answer to that question is we have each other. If we choose to share ourselves with one another, it is a choice. It is an effort. Not everyone always thinks the same we do. Hello, we're UUA. We know that. We have a lot of differences. But the one thing that I think we all have in common, again, is that through line of suffering. So since I've been talking for a very long time, I'm going to wrap it up and not give you the rest of these 4 pages that I still have remaining here, because it's all basically saying the same thing. I want to give you a takeaway. I want to give you something positive. I've sat here and told you all these horrible things about my life and what I've been through. I've said some very scary and tragic things. I also mentioned earlier that I do think things happen for a reason, but you know, maybe they don't. Maybe there is no point. But I have a really hard time believing that, and I choose to believe that the more beautiful world that my heart knows exists is a world of connection and meaning. And we've heard those words before. I have to believe that everything I've experienced, survived, grown from was to strengthen me to the point of being able to stand here today, to share this with you, and to stand somewhere else tomorrow to share with someone else, and the next day, and the next day, and the next. And we as a community, we have to do this work with each other and for each other, and outside of this community into the world. We have to work together to explore those post-traumatic growth pathways from tragedy to triumph, through darkness and into light. My takeaway to you is to be a post-traumatic growth ambassador. Go talk to someone. Ask them how they're doing and really mean it. Listen to them. And when you want to open your mouth and respond, don't. Listen and keep listening. Be open. Be willing to share. Be willing to be vulnerable. Be open to thriving over surviving. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to hurt. Just don't give up. You are loved, and you are not alone. Thank you.